Conipium and Maunamuatash Sanacomoket, the sacred prayer sites of Shutesbury, Massachusetts. Please let me begin with a proper greeting. Nitampog Kanawanutash Nunipan Aquabian. The buttonik at the buttomish Nawachi Kumamanauson Nishkataewash, Yakisko Kwanigan, Newanayatuang. Nutis was Nohham Cachat-Schilling Kitiomet. Conipium and Manamuatash Sanacomoket. Welcome to the sacred gathering places of Shutesbury. Saving Shutesbury native sacred sites is easy. By adding protections to less than 10 acres of public conservation land, we can protect most of the best native sacred sites in Shutesbury. Because these lands are on state and town property, we do not need to purchase them in order to preserve them. These sacred sites are already in conservation, and we would only be acknowledging them while adding a layer of further preservation. Historic and cultural preservation are part of the stated mission of the DCR, even in absence of completing that mission on the ground. To put this discussion in a cultural context, let me introduce the ritual cosmography of the northeastern Algonquian people, specifically the Nipmuc people and the Pecumtuck people of this area of Massachusetts and their neighbors. Here on this screen you see a map of the geography of the central Connecticut Valley, which is overlaid with a celestial map according to the culture of the regional Algonquian people, and a physical map of standing stones at a site called Tokekumwash in Shutesbury. In the center of the screen is where the Connecticut River crosses the Deerfield and Millers Rivers, Connecticut, Papakantakwash, and Pecumtuck. At that place is what is known as Great Falls, and just to the southeast is the historic village of Peskamscut. Nearby is Sacred Hill Ceremonial Site, which is the first ceremonial stone landscape, ritual, traditional cultural property, recognized by the National Registry of Historic Places east of the Mississippi. Further on that map, in the celestial sense and in the physical sense, to the north we have the source of the Connecticut River, and also we have celestial, in celestial terms, Nanumio, which is the North Star, which is significant in all cultures. And then to the east, of course, we have Wahantiopong, which is the sunrise place, or the bursting forth place, the fire coming forth place. And in the west, we have Ehelisigak, which is the settings place, where things set. To the south, we have Kunquachu, which is the Nipmuc name for Mount Toby. Kunquachu means the highest of mountains, and it is the highest mountain in the area. And it's the traditional home of Wittum Manito. Manito are spirits who are godlike in that sense, who give all the things in the world and take care of those things along with us. Wittum is a healing Manito, and Mount Toby happens to be one of the most biologically diverse places in the Northeast. It's a sacred gathering place for healing herbs and for certain rituals. And Wittum is the Manito of waters coming down from high places, from the sky, and from the waterfalls and springs that arise on top of this mountain, which has at least 7 waterfalls and many groups of caves. And to the northeast is Wittum's counterpart, Hobomok, who traditionally in this region is located, his home is located in the Bald Hills of Northfields, formerly Skakiat. Hobomok and the other Manito live everywhere, but they also have local homes. Um, and also, that is the place where Anishkutog is, the constellation we know as Pleiades, or the star group known as Pleiades, or Pleiades, which is where the Perseid showers in August uh, send meteors towards, or it appears that way. And they shower primarily into Ashkutog, which means the council fires, and they cross along the Milky Way to the southwest, where we find the home of Gardantuit, who is also called Kichtan, Kichtan, Geshelmiang, and has many names, who is the great creator, um, and whose regional location is regarded as the Goshen Hills. In between us and there, of course, is the most ancient habitation in the valley, this part of the valley, at the Dedic site in South Deerfield. To the southeast is where the Turtle Clan sits in the annual ceremony of the Lenape people, the Delaware Nation, um, and where they keep the ritual turtle shell rattle, which is needed for all ceremonies. It's also where Shutesbury Ridge and its environs are located, including Brushy Mountain. And it's the home of Mishanicus, which is Venus, who ushers the sun into the sky during the warm seasons and then disappears during the cold seasons, at least in relation to the sun. Um, in the northwest is Algasco, who is the giant beaver, another constellation which is traditionally associated with the Burnt Hills and Hawley. So this marks out a ritual landscape both on the earth, in this region of Franklin County, and in the sky above, that relate to the rivers and the physical landscape. And those are also marked out by standing stones that you see marked on the back of the turtle, one which marks north, south, east, and then another smaller stone, and then on the southwest there's another one that points to where the sun sets between two stone grouping relics in the period of August 12th, when the Perseid showers begin, which marks the beginning of a holiday called Nohham Cachat-Schilling, which means when we see it, we remember them. It's a memorial service or ceremony for those who've gone over to the other world. So we surveyed 60 sites in detail over a period of 3 years in Shutesbury, and we gathered 33 data points on each above-ground feature, each man-made relic in those sites, for a total of over 750 relics. And we treated those to 3 levels of analysis. We chose the relics that were in best condition, that's why there's only 750, in order to best evaluate them against against data, or through data, in a reliable way. So in this screen you see the center of a site called Takakamwash, where you can see 3 large standing stones. Uh, One is in the center forefield of your, or foreground of your screen, and it's facing us edgewise. You see part of the face. To the mid field on the left is the south marked stone. Between these 2 stones runs the direct north-south line, adjusted for true north. And then to the west is a 3rd standing stone, just to the right midfield uh, of a tree. You can see its face, and you can see how these 3 stones their faces and their edges are aligned very closely. The one closest to us, though, the north stone, is a little bit off from the other 2, and it points actually to the stone that's lying down part of the way, which is propped up in that particular position, and that marks southwest. And just downhill from here, across the water, are 2 stone relics, 2 stone grouping relics, in between which the sun falls as it sets on August 12th. Just to the left of the foreground stone is a smaller triangular stone that marks direct east, and that helps mark when the spring ceremonies begin. And the distancing between these stones actually relates proportionally to the distancing between this site and other related sites of importance nearby. In order to map out these sites, we measured the distances between all the relics, and we measured their dimensions individually. And we took a square meter grid, and we drew everything inside those grids, and then mapped these out onto graph plots of sections of sites. And here we have the center section of a site called Pashpashant, which is where the sun breaks. And you can see the regular placement of these objects, and they actually conform on more than one level into a greater object. So here you see more of the same site just to the north of the center. You can see the very regular placement. Depending on how you group them, they're either rather much in rows, or if you take groups of 3 or 4, you get triangles and rhombuses, which shows the very regular placement. And this is not on flat ground or even empty space. This is on a very rocky slope, and somehow they managed to place these out regularly in this kind of fashion. So once we do these individual grids, we collate this together. And if you look at what we've looked at so far in these 3 grids, this actually configures a replica in a large way of the Milky Way, which has a fork in it, by the way, in the second half as you approach the end towards the Creator's home. And all these graph grids, these sectional grids, we get a plot diagram, which here has been color-coded for type of relic and is made to scale. This is a 90 square meter area in which all of this is contained. There's over 108 relics in 90 square meters, which is less than a football field. To the northwest, you can see a row of green marked features, which are stacked stones, stacked triangular stones, 5 to 7 stones in each stack, and they delimit the north, or the southwest rather, area or edge of the site. There's nothing man-made beyond them in this site, and they also mark out the rim of the hill or the slope above, which points out features in the skyline, which are ceremonially important. There are certain areas that are empty within the body of the stone grouping, the site, and a lot of those mark out areas of damage where individual features could not be recognized determinatively as a certain kind of ritual feature, so they were left empty. There are features there, but in their current state, we couldn't be sure about exactly what they were for, and so they are left blank. But you can see that it configures the form of a bird flying towards a mark which is in the center, lower part of the center of your screen. That's actually a stone marker, which lies directly east. So it conforms a bird flying directly east, and across the water, across the way, is another site east of this, which again leads to another site. And that's how they sort of string along through the landscape and are joined by a sacred pilgrimage route. In the preliminary analysis, we looked at 60 sites, and we chose 500 relics in superior condition from those sites, to which we applied 19 cultural criteria, which in turn are based on more than 30 sub-criteria, and those relate to cultural function, either European American cultural function or Northeastern Algonquin cultural function. And against those criteria, of the 500 relics, 96% meet 16 of them, 88% meet 18 criteria, and 68% meet all 19 criteria. Now, a point was only given when a criterion matched Northeastern Algonquin ritual function. So that means we get 0 if it's European American or unknown, and 1 if it's a Northeastern Algonquin ritual function. And you can see how massively they do correlate to those Algonquin criteria. And in this screen, you can see 4 relics that are in mediocre condition. They're being swallowed up by soil and leaves that is building in this area of hydrological deposition. Um, and in the foreground, you can see in the center one Katonkuok. This is called Nipama Katonkuok. Katonkuok is a stone prayer cache. These are features that are invested with prayers, and the prayers are stored within them metaphysically. And these are prayers to heal and balance the world. And if you look straight behind this into the rear of the screen, near the edge of the snow line, where the rise falls away a little bit, near a tree, it's a little harder to see, but there's another relic lined up directly, and those line up east-west, and the ones on the right and left line up north-south. And this is a very regular feature, and so is the distance. And you can see how regular the diamond they form is. You go site at Pashpashant, we see again 4 features in the center of this site. One has fallen down in the foreground. You can see how it's fallen down to one side. The other 3 are in fair condition. And you can see again the same kind of arrangement and distancing, although the 2 side ones are a little closer together. But if you look to the left, there's a very steep hill rising immediately in the rear left of your field of view, which may have caused the uh, planners to move this particular feature a little closer in order to accommodate the landscape. This is the only flat area in this site. It's on a very steep site, and again, they align north-south and east-west, so we're looking from the opposite pole, but they line up again into a neat diamond. We found that the distribution and interrelationship of the features of all of these sites is very regular. Looking at 500 objects in the preliminary analysis from 60 sites, the data show that 80% are located on similar terrain types. 85%, that's 51 out of 60 sites, are located along a water flow. 75% have a matched pair or quartet of boulder cairns with a similar nearby feature. 20% have Wamanakwasik or Wanakusik, depending on the dialect, which are called honoring stones or sacrifice stones in colonial reports. 80% have a large boulder, a split boulder, or paired boulders near a water source. Again, out of these sites, when it comes to individual Katonkok features, which are the stone groupings, the prayer relics, 80% of Anokweu Katonkowik, which are low ground-based stone groups, that lie primarily to the east side, while 85% distribute Nipamu Katonkowik, which are higher boulder-based stone groups, to the west side of the site. And 56 out of 60, which is about 94%, distribute stone groups in clusters with similar correlation to water. 75%, 3/4 of them, have Sunshnipamu or Manitou stones, which are different kinds of standing stones. And 80% have recognizably intact Tnoposong Katonkuk, which are turtle effigies. This is a Nipamokodonkok at Pashpashant. It's a standing prayer cache, a stone prayer cache. You can see that it's made primarily of thin, flat, square stones, which are called tabular in archaeology. And it sits, although you can't see it too well with all the leaf deposition, on a boulder, and has 5 to 7 courses of fairly neatly arranged stones that form a round configuration, the stones fanning out, and is capped by rounder stones that are smaller and less tabular, in a less formally designed fashion. "90% of sites have these. Here's another site where you might think it's even the same object, it's so similar, yet They're at two sites across town from each other. And this is a Wapamiskig. The stone groupings have the same size and proportion and design. They usually have 5 to 7 courses of stone. Um, their overall dimensions are about the same. They seldom vary by more than half a meter. They are partly hollow inside, and they rise between 8/10 of a meter and 1.8 meters from the current ground level, which varies the ground level in current times depending on whether there's erosion or deposition happening at the site. This is the Nohham Cachat-Schilling, again having the same number of courses and using the same type of stones, although none of the stones at this site are as flat as the other two. Here we have a turtle effigy that you can see in the center foreground the head of the turtle, which is propped up, leaving a space underneath. You can see part of the front flippers and what would be the carapace, its back, which has been somewhat disturbed and is being subsumed by loam and leaves over time, but is fairly intact and still recognizable. Here's another Tanopa Swank, a turtle effigy at another site. 80% of these lie near the east perimeter of sites. None of them lie at the west perimeter of sites. And that suits a ritual function at these sites, and that's why they're placed at these perimeters. So it correlates closely to ritual function. This case, you can see the carapace has been disturbed some in the middle, but you can see the front flipper and even the back flipper and part of the tail and the head propped up. This is the same. Here is the same feature from the opposite side. Again, you can see the flippers in front and back and the head propped up. The stones selected for these features are very regular in size and form. Here you see another turtle effigy. The head is to the lower right, and it's actually falling into the hole where it was propped up because the stones have become disturbed over time. But you can see the back, the carapace, all the little stones that are on a larger slab, part of which you can see to the lower right. It's very mossy covered, as you can see a small arc of the slab that it sits on. And to show you how small these stones are, you can see that there are wintergreens, Galtheric procumbens, growing on this effigy. And if you don't know, this wintergreens are only about 2 or 3 inches across in a group of 2 or 3 leaves. So it gives you an idea of how small these stones are. So there's no practical purpose to move such stones in large numbers. And in sites, this site happens to have 127 such features, not all of the same kind, but of 4 different kinds. And it has about a dozen of this type of feature. So you can see no practical purpose for moving so many little stones and designing these very complex features out of them. Another common feature, but one that is often out of sight and unseen because they don't rise off the ground more than a few inches. They're very often buried in loam and leaves and pine needles. And that's the case in these two. The only two that I've ever excavated in any way. I've only removed the pine needles from the surface. And 94% of these out of 130 that were intact that we found have 4 to 6 concentric rings of stones. These are very small stones. They're all roundish stones, and then the center stone, if it's still in place, because it often gets rolled out, sitting up top and being round as it is usually a contrasting stone. In this case, it's a jasper stone with white stripes. Again, the center stone is contrasting. It's usually quartz, jasper, pegmatite, or some other unusual stone. This one's a leucic granite, and you can see the way it captures the light. In this case, you can see the 4 concentric rings lined up and traces of a fifth further down. But I didn't go any further because I didn't want to disturb the original soil surface level. Here's another one along a trail that's been partly damaged. The center stone is missing, but again, you can see the concentric rings of the stone, and there's about 4 rings visible here. Out of 130 of these features, we averaged out the size of all the visible stones that were used, and they averaged less than 10 centimeters, which is very small. That's less than 5 inches. Here's another one that's being swallowed up by leaves and loam and plants. There's a baby Indian cucumber in the foreground just to the left. Shows you how small these stones are. That's a plant that those leaves are only about 2 inches wide at that point. And here I've numbered the rings of stone. The center stone has been dislodged, but the rest of it's pretty intact. So this shows you that not only are the sites arranged similarly according to a certain design, but the objects within them have a very regular design. And all of these features that I've just shown you, these last low ground stone groupings, are about 2 meters wide. They don't vary by more than a meter. They seldom vary even by half a meter. And the other features before them are also very regular in size. They're so regular in size and type of stone and size of stone that they, in the end, they're fairly regular in the total number of stones in each feature. And beyond that, the sites themselves are very regularly designed and placed. For instance, 5 sites at Yasipuaset, which means 4 small streams, all share the same southwest vista above the same small river, and they all lie along the headwaters of that river, or that small river. They all lie on a southwest slope where the other views are obstructed by hills rising behind them. And they all look into the same valley where several ancient villages existed. At Pashpashant, all 7 sites look east, which is where the sun is greeted at Sesquanakiswish, which is a spring welcoming ceremony, a major holiday where the sun, the ancestors, and life are welcomed back to the land. Out of 60 sites assessed, 51 are grouped in such clusters. And in this particular cluster, there are over 450 relics. There are 8 major such clusters of sites which face all 8 of the directions that we discussed in the beginning, where the Manitoiwok, the Manito, live in their traditional homes in the sky and in the earth, all of whom bring different kinds of gifts to all living beings. Within the sites themselves, the objects are also configured in a regular fashion, even if the overall plan of the site is different. We can see 4 sites here, Tekekumwash, 2 in Tekekumwash cluster, 1 at Wabamiskig, and another at Pashpashant. The dotted line delineates the limit of recognizable man-made objects in each case. So that's the boundary, the perimeter is the last place we find a recognizable man-made object. In the upper left, you can see in the blue circle, those are all a certain type of Nipamo Kontoko, the standing stone groups. To the right, the yellow circle are a certain kind of low ground stone groupings. These are the prayer caches, the objects that are invested with prayer. They're divided by the stream of a spring. And the blank circles, those are different kinds of features that don't fall into those 2 categories. But you can see the ones in yellow lie entirely to the east, the ones in blue lie to the west of the site, which is shown north-south. And along the eastern rim, there are several green small circles, and those are turtle effigies. There are more that are in a damaged condition that couldn't be positively determined because of their condition, so they're not included. The only ones marked are ones that are in such perfect condition that they can be positively described as a turtle effigy and nothing else. But you can see they all lie along the eastern perimeter, which is a very specific ritual function for them being there. At Wabbamiskig to the right, you can see again the blue circles. That kind of relic is all to the west, while the yellow circles, that kind of relic is all to the east. And the other types lie in between. Again, the green circles, the turtle effigies, again, are all on the eastern boundary. To the lower left, we have a repetition of the same thing. The one kind is to the west, divided from the ones to the east, um, in separate spaces, and the turtle effigies in little green circles are all along the eastern edge. And again, lower right, we have a repetition, even though it's a very different configuration. Um, the one type is divided from the other type. They lie east and west of each other, and the turtle effigies are all along the eastern boundary. And this is again repeated at these 4 other sites. In the upper right of the screen, you can see the first site we looked at, which looks like a bird flying east. And again, that's on the west side of these streams and springs, and has only the blue type, only the standing type of feature. Whereas on the east side, the yellow type of feature, the low ground feature, is found, but not the blue type. And again, the blank circles are other kinds of features that are of not those 2 types. And again, the few turtle effigies that remain are in excellent condition all fall on the eastern boundary. We collected, as we said, 33 data points on over 750 relics, which amounts to quite a few pages of tables. But just to take a look at one table will tell us a lot about how these are laid out, and we'll show you how the sites are designed according to a template, a regular formula. In this screen, we have 3 sites, starting from the largest site to the smallest site. And in the first column, uh, it says average N1. That is the average distance to the first neighbor. This is what they call a nearest neighbor statistical evaluation, which describes a set of objects according to their relationship to each other. So you take any given feature, and this looks at how far away is its first relic neighbor. You can see from the largest site at the top, this is the largest site physically and has the most objects in it. It's 2.7 meters, and it concentrates as you go down the column to the smallest site, which has the smallest overall area and a lesser number of total features. And the average of these 3 sites is only 2 meters away. You see that none of the 3 sites vary widely from that average, and you'll find the same thing as we go across to the right. The second neighbor is also found at a regular distance, something close to double the distance of the first neighbor. And again, when you look at the bottom, none of these figures vary widely from their average. So it shows a very regular placement. There's not a lot of variation between the sites, and there's not a lot of variation within the site. The maximum distance to the first neighbor, again, stays close to their average at the bottom. The minimum distance, some are very close, but again, they don't wander far from the average. And the minimum distance, the second neighbor, again, stays close around the average. The average number of neighbors within 10 meters and the maximum number of neighbors within 10 meters is also very telling. You can see that the average number concentrates quite a bit as you go from the largest site to the smallest site, while the maximum number of neighbors doesn't vary a whole lot. It only varies by 2, and their average is 13.3. None of them average by even 2 from that. So it shows that the placement is very regular. They're using some kind of template for the design, despite the fact that these 3 sites are all on very different terrains and have different overall sizes and different overall numbers of features. There are many more types of ritual features that aren't included in this discussion because of time. But this is another important type of feature, but um, which is a prayer portal of a different kind, and one that is found in many sites, but not found in as great numbers as the four feature types that we looked at. This is an even less common type of feature. This balanced rock overlooks a very special kind of sacred site that isn't normally entered by anybody other than the priesthood of the Algonquian peoples. And the rock is balanced on a center stone, and the center stone, which is pyramidal in form or pointed with a wider base, has a ridge along it where it meets the upper rock, and that faces directly east-west. When the sun rises, it strikes here first, lighting up this ridge and the space underneath the rock. The rock on top, the flat faces on both sides line up north-south, and at the north end there's a rock, at the south end there's a rock, and then the rock to the left of the center stone is hard to determine how it was originally positioned or if it was originally standing up, but appears to have slid down to a certain extent from its original position. From down the hill, this sits on atop the edge of a very steep hillside. From down the hill, it looks like the brow of a rather stern face looking down the hill towards the east, and the first light of day that rises above the valley strikes this spot. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and peace, and show you one more relic, which is the standing stone, standing free about 1.8 meters high, about a third of a meter deep. I don't know how many tons it weighs. There's a white stripe that goes up the center of it that catches the sunset at summer solstice, and is covered on two sides with huge hand-sized foliate lichens that are centuries old, and behind it down the hill lies another prayer site with many features in it, scores and scores of prayer features in it. We can protect all this and keep this for future generations, for all of us to share in this very special sacred landscape that we have together on our public lands by simply adding a layer of protection to land that's already in conservation. We can do this